A poor farmer gave his last seeds to a beggar, never imagining that this single act of desperate kindness would one day save everything he had left in the world. Samuel Thorne stood at the edge of his failing farm, watching the sunset paint the withered fields in deceptive gold. The light made things look better than they were, a cruel trick of nature that somehow still managed to break his heart each evening. 37 years old, with hands permanently stained by soil and heartbreak, he removed his worn cap and wiped sweat from his brow with a trembling hand. 3 seasons of drought, 2 failed harvests, 1 more chance before the bank took everything. His fingertips traced the small cloth pouch in his pocket, the last of his heirloom corn seeds, passed down through 4 generations of Thorns. Seeds that had survived the Great Depression, seeds that his grandfather swore had special properties. Magic, he'd called it, though Samuel had long stopped believing in such things. 27 seeds. That's all that remained. The farmhouse behind him stood silent, too quiet since Maria had taken the children to her sister's place in the city. Just until things get better, she'd said, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her dwindling hope. 3 months now, and the empty rooms echoed with absent laughter. Samuel clutched the seed pouch tighter. Tomorrow he'd plant them in the small patch by the creek where moisture still blessed the ground. Not enough to save the farm, but perhaps enough to convince Maria that they shouldn't give up yet, that he hadn't failed them completely. Night settled over the land as he walked back to the empty house, shoulders bent beneath the weight of too many prayers gone unanswered. The darkness inside matched the darkness settling in his chest, a familiar heaviness that had become his constant companion. Sleep came in restless bursts, dreams of green fields and children's laughter haunting him until dawn broke, gray and unforgiving. Samuel rose before the sun, made coffee on the old stove, and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the seed pouch he'd placed before him. Just enough, he whispered to himself, a mantra of desperate hope. The sound came just as he was pulling on his boots, a soft knocking at the door, so unexpected that at first Samuel thought he'd imagined it. Nobody visited anymore. The neighboring farms had their own troubles, and friends had grown scarce as his fortunes dwindled. The knocking came again, more insistent. Samuel opened the door to find an old man standing there, thin and weathered, with eyes that seemed both ancient and alert. His clothes were ragged but clean, his white beard neatly trimmed despite his apparent homelessness. "Forgive the intrusion," the old man said, his voice surprisingly melodic. "I've been walking since yesterday and wondered if I might trouble you for some water." Samuel hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Now come in. I can offer coffee too if you'd like." "Most kind," the old man said, stepping inside with a slight limp. His eyes took in the sparse kitchen, the empty chairs, the unwashed dishes from days past, the calendar where Samuel had been marking off days until the bank's deadline. "You're alone here?" the old man asked, accepting the glass of water Samuel offered. Samuel nodded, something about the stranger's gentle gaze making it impossible to maintain his usual guarded silence. "Families in the city, waiting for better times. And you believe those times are coming?" Samuel's hand instinctively went to the seed pouch in his pocket. "Have to believe in something." The old man drank slowly, his eyes never leaving Samuel's face. When he finished, he sighed deeply. "I haven't eaten in 2 days, he admitted. "I don't suppose." Samuel's stomach clenched. His own pantry was nearly bare. Some beans, half a loaf of stale bread, a few potatoes sprouting eyes. But the man's quiet dignity moved something in him. "I'll make us breakfast," he said, surprising himself with the offer. They ate in silence, beans on toast, the last of the coffee. Samuel noticed how the old man savored each bite, how his hands trembled slightly, how deep the lines around his eyes grew when he smiled in gratitude. "You're a farmer?" the old man asked finally, gesturing toward the fields visible through the window. "Was trying to be again?" The words stuck in Samuel's throat. "Drought's taken almost everything." The old man nodded slowly. "I've seen many farms on my travels. The land is suffering everywhere." He paused, studying Samuel's face. "What will you plant?" Before he could think better of it, Samuel pulled out the seed pouch and placed it on the table between them. "Heirloom corn. All I have left. Family seeds." The old man's eyes widened slightly. "May I?" Samuel nodded, and the stranger carefully opened the pouch, pouring a few seeds into his palm. He examined them with surprising intensity, rubbing one between his fingers, even holding one up to the light. "These are special," he said finally. "I can feel it." Samuel almost smiled. "My grandfather used to say the same thing." "Wise man, your grandfather." The old man returned the seeds to the pouch with careful reverence. "When will you plant them?" "Today. There's a spot by the creek where the soil might be kind enough." The old man nodded, then fell silent, staring out the window at the dusty fields. After a long moment, he turned back to Samuel, his eyes suddenly filled with something that looked like sorrow. "I must continue my journey," he said, rising slowly from his chair. But first, he hesitated, then reached into his tattered coat and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "I have nothing to offer in return for your kindness except this." He unwrapped the bundle to reveal a handful of strange-looking seeds, larger than corn, with an unusual mottled pattern Samuel had never seen before. "These are very rare," the old man said, "from a land far from here. They grow even in difficult conditions, but they require—" He paused, searching for words. "They require sacrifice to flourish." Samuel stared at the strange seeds. "I couldn't take your seeds. I have no land to plant them," the old man said simply. "And you have shown kindness to a stranger when you had little to give. That matters." Before Samuel could protest further, the old man wrapped his weathered hand around Samuel's wrist, his touch surprisingly warm and strong. "Sometimes we must give away what we think we cannot spare to receive what we cannot imagine." The words hung in the air between them, mysterious and somehow both comforting and unsettling. Samuel found himself accepting the bundle, the unfamiliar seeds heavy in his palm. They walked to the door together, and Samuel watched as the old man made his way down the dusty driveway. At the last moment, the stranger turned back. "Plant them with faith," he called, his voice carrying on the morning breeze. "Remember, sacrifice before harvest." Samuel stood in the doorway long after the man had disappeared from sight, the bundle of strange seeds in one hand, his family's precious heirloom seeds in the other. Something about the encounter left him feeling both unnerved and oddly hopeful. The sun climbed higher as Samuel gathered his tools and headed toward the small patch of land near the creek. The soil there was darker, still holding moisture from the underground spring that had never completely dried up, even during the worst of the drought. As he walked, his mind kept returning to the old man's words. Sacrifice before harvest? He knelt in the soft earth, carefully marking out rows with string and stakes. 27 holes for 27 precious seeds. As he reached into his pocket for the family seed pouch, his fingers brushed against the stranger's bundle. He pulled out both, weighing them in his hands. The morning light caught on something moving on the path leading away from the farm, a figure in the distance. Samuel squinted, recognizing the bent form of the old man, now making his slow way along the dusty road. He was limping more pronouncedly now, one hand braced against his side as if in pain. Something twisted in Samuel's chest. He looked down at the seeds in his hands, his last hope versus a stranger's mysterious gift. The family seeds were certain, proven over generations. The stranger's seeds were unknown, possibly worthless. But the old man was hungry, in pain, walking who knew how far with no guarantee of another meal or place to rest. Before he could reconsider, Samuel was on his feet, running down the path, the pouch of family seeds clutched in his hand. "Wait," he called out, his voice cracking with the effort. "Please wait." The old man turned slowly, surprise evident in his weathered face as Samuel approached, breathing hard. "You need these more than I do," Samuel said, pressing the pouch of family seeds into the man's hands. "You can sell them in town. They're valuable heirloom varieties. Should get you enough for food and maybe a bus ticket." The old man's eyes widened, his hands closing reflexively around the pouch. "Your family seeds? But these are your heritage, your last hope." Samuel swallowed hard, fighting against the voice in his head, screaming that he was being a fool. "I have your seeds to try, and you need help now." For a long moment, the old man said nothing, his ancient eyes searching Samuel's face. Then, to Samuel's surprise, tears began to well up and trail down the weathered cheeks. "Not in 40 years of wandering," the old man whispered. "Has anyone given away their last hope for my sake?" He clutched the seed pouch to his chest, then reached out with his free hand to grasp Samuel's shoulder. "You don't know what you've done today, son. You don't know yet." His voice had changed somehow, carrying a resonance that sent a strange shiver down Samuel's spine. I find somewhere safe," Samuel said, suddenly embarrassed by the intensity of the moment. "And maybe if they grow well for you, think of me sometime." The old man nodded slowly. "I will think of you with every sunrise," he said. Then more softly, "Plant those seeds before sunset. All of them, together in the heart of your land. And have faith, Samuel Thorne. Have faith." Before Samuel could ask how the man knew his full name, the old man had turned away, his steps somehow lighter despite his obvious pain. the precious seed pouch now secured inside his ragged coat. Samuel stood watching until the figure disappeared around a bend in the road, wondering if he'd just committed the final act of foolishness that would cost him everything. Back at the creekside plot, Samuel gathered his tools, but found himself unable to plant the stranger's seeds in the carefully prepared ground. The old man's last instructions echoed in his mind. Plant those seeds before sunset, all of them, together in the heart of your land. The heart of his land. Samuel knew exactly where that was. In the center of the main field, now dry and barren, stood an ancient oak tree. His great-grandfather had built the farm around it, claiming the tree marked a special place where the earth's energy ran strong. As a boy, Samuel had played in its shade. As a young man, he'd proposed to Maria beneath its branches. Even now, despite the drought, the old oak showed signs of life, its deep roots finding water where nothing else could. If anything was the heart of his land, it was there. The sun was lowering in the sky as Samuel dug a single, deep hole at the base of the oak. The soil was hard, resistant, nothing like the soft earth by the creek. His hands blistered and bled as he worked, but something drove him forward. Determination or desperation, or perhaps some flicker of mad hope ignited by the strange encounter. When the hole was 3 feet deep, Samuel unwrapped the bundle of seeds. In the fading light, they seemed to pulse with an inner luminescence, their mottled surfaces catching the sunset's glow. He counted them, 13 in total, each the size of a large marble. "This is foolishness," he whispered to himself, even as he carefully arranged the seeds in the bottom of the hole. Complete foolishness. Yet as he covered them with earth, patting the soil gently into place, a strange calm settled over him. He had given away his last sure hope and replaced it with a mystery. There was a certain freedom in that, the freedom of having nothing left to lose. As darkness fell, Samuel made his way back to the empty farmhouse, his tools slung over his shoulder. For the first time in months, he slept without dreaming, a deep and healing sleep that lasted until birds announced the dawn. He woke with a start, momentarily disoriented by the quality of light filtering through his bedroom window. It seemed different somehow, richer, more golden, and there was a sound, a rustling, whispering sound that he couldn't immediately identify. Samuel dressed quickly and stepped outside, then froze on the porch steps, his coffee mug slipping from suddenly nerveless fingers to shatter on the wooden boards. Where yesterday there had been only dusty, barren earth around the old oak tree, today there was movement, green living movement. Heart pounding, Samuel approached the oak tree, unable to believe what his eyes were telling him. Surrounding the tree in a perfect circle 30 feet in diameter, corn stalks swayed in the morning breeze. Corn stalks that stood chest high already, their leaves a vibrant green that almost hurt the eyes after so many months of dust and brown. "Impossible," Samuel whispered, reaching out to touch one of the stalks. It felt real, cool and alive under his trembling fingers, beaded with morning dew. Completely impossible. He knelt where he had buried the strange seeds, finding only rich, dark soil where yesterday there had been only dust and rocks. The earth here felt different, almost alive, pulsing with energy he could feel through his work-roughened hands. Samuel spent the morning circling the miraculous growth, examining each stalk, unable to comprehend what he was seeing. By midday, he was certain the plants had grown taller, now reaching to his shoulders. By evening, they were over his head, their tassels waving in the sunset breeze. He slept poorly that night, waking every few hours to check from his window, half expecting to find the miracle vanished with the darkness. But the corn remained, its outline visible in the moonlight, and with each check, Samuel could swear it had grown even taller. Dawn of the second day brought another shock. The circle had expanded, now reaching 50 feet from the oak tree in all directions. The original stalks now towered 12 feet high, and already he could see ears forming, fat and promising, far larger than any corn he'd grown before. By the third day, the circle of growth had reached the edges of the main field, covering nearly 2 acres. On the fourth day, it expanded into the eastern field. On the fifth, the western. By the end of the week, where there had been only dust and despair, there now stood the most abundant corn crop Samuel had ever witnessed. Thick, tall, and heavy with oversized ears that bent the massive stalks with their weight. News spread quickly. Neighbors who had avoided the failing farm now found excuses to drive by, slowing their trucks to stare open-mouthed at the miraculous transformation. Some stopped to ask questions that Samuel couldn't answer. A few offered theories, everything from secret government experiments to divine intervention. Samuel said little, tending to the miraculous crop with reverent care, though in truth it seemed to need nothing from him. No water, no fertilizer, no protection from pests. The corn simply grew, vital and perfect, defying every natural law Samuel had ever known. On the 10th day, as the corn began to ripen, far faster than any natural growing cycle, a black sedan pulled into the driveway. A man in an expensive suit emerged, introducing himself as a representative from Agritech, the largest agricultural corporation in the state. Mr. Thorne, the man said, not bothering to hide his excitement as he gazed at the fields of impossibly perfect corn. We've been hearing remarkable things about your innovative growing methods. Samuel said nothing, arms crossed over his chest. We'd like to make you an offer. The man continued, pulling out a checkbook. For samples of your crop and information about your cultivation techniques. He named a figure that made Samuel's breath catch. Enough to pay off the bank, repair the house, buy new equipment, and still have plenty left over. The seeds aren't mine to sell, Samuel said quietly. The man laughed, clearly thinking this was a negotiating tactic. He doubled his offer on the spot. Samuel simply shook his head and walked away, leaving the corporate man calling after him with increasingly desperate offers. Others came, university researchers, agricultural experts, even a team from the Department of Agriculture. All left disappointed when Samuel refused to explain or to sell so much as a single kernel of the mysterious crop. What he did do, however, was call Maria. You need to come home, he said simply when she answered. Bring the children. Things have changed. There was a long pause before she responded, her voice careful, measuring. Changed how, Samuel? How could he explain? You have to see it, he said finally. Please, Maria, trust me one more time. 2 days later, as Samuel was examining the first ears ready for harvest, each nearly twice the size of normal corn, with kernels that shone like gold in the sunlight, a familiar car came bouncing up the dusty driveway. His heart leapt at the sight of Maria behind the wheel, their 2 children, Emma, 10, and James, 7, bouncing excitedly in the back seat. They had not seen the farm in 3 months. The transformation from the dusty, failing property they had left to the lush, green miracle before them now stopped them in their tracks. Maria stepped from the car slowly, her eyes wide with disbelief as she took in the towering corn, the vibrant green that had replaced barren brown. Samuel, she whispered, what have you done? The children had no such restraint. They erupted from the car with shrieks of excitement, running towards Samuel with arms outstretched. He caught them both, burying his face in their hair, breathing in their familiar scent as tears stung his eyes. Daddy, the corn is huge, James exclaimed, pulling back to stare at the towering stalks. Can we go in it? Is it like a maze? Emma asked, already edging toward the nearest row. Samuel laughed, a sound so foreign to his ears after months of silence that it startled him. Careful, he cautioned. Stay where I can see you. As the children darted between the nearest stalks, Samuel turned to Maria, who still stood frozen beside the car, her expression unreadable. I know it seems impossible, he began. Seems? Maria interrupted, her voice tight. Samuel, corn doesn't grow this fast. It doesn't grow this big. It doesn't, she gestured helplessly at the verdant fields that stretched to the horizon. It doesn't do this. Samuel took a deep breath and told her everything. The old man, the exchange of seeds, the mysterious growth that had begun at the oak tree and spread across their land like a living wave. As he spoke, Maria's expression shifted from disbelief to wonder to something like fear. Oh, who was he? She whispered when Samuel finished. What were those seeds? Samuel shook his head. I don't know. But whatever they were, they've saved us, Maria. The bank called yesterday. They've withdrawn the foreclosure notice. 3 different buyers have made offers on the harvest. Record prices. Maria stepped closer to one of the massive stalks, reaching out to touch it with trembling fingers. It doesn't feel wrong to you. Unnatural? Before Samuel could answer, Emma's voice called out from deeper within the corn. That daddy. Mommy. He and I. This certainly tried to come look. There's a man in here. Samuel and Maria exchanged alarmed glances before rushing into the corn, following their daughter's voice. They found both children standing in a small clearing they hadn't noticed before. A perfect circle of bare earth in the middle of the towering crop, directly beneath the spreading branches of the ancient oak tree. And there, sitting calmly on a fallen log, was the old man, the beggar to whom Samuel had given his last seeds. Only he didn't look like a beggar anymore. His ragged clothes had been replaced by simple but clean garments of an unusual cut. His white beard was neatly trimmed, his face less weathered, his eyes bright and clear. He was smiling at the children, who showed no fear of the stranger. "He says he knows you, Daddy," Emma said, bouncing on her toes. "He says he gave you magic seeds." Samuel stepped forward cautiously, Maria close behind him. "You came back," he said simply. The old man nodded. "I told you I would think of you with every sunrise," he reminded Samuel, "and I wish to see the harvest with my own eyes." "Who are you?" Maria asked, her arm protectively around James's shoulders. The old man's smile deepened, crinkling the corners of his eyes. "I have been called many things in many lands," he said, "but names matter less than choices, don't they?" He stood moving with a grace that belied his apparent age and approached Samuel. "You gave away your last hope to help a stranger?" he said quietly. "Such actions do not go unnoticed or unrewarded." "The seeds," Samuel began, "they're not natural. They are more natural than anything human hands have created." The old man corrected gently. "They respond to the heart of the one who plants them. They grow according to the worthiness of the soil, both the earth itself and the soul of the one who tends it." He reached up to touch one of the massive ears of corn. "This harvest is merely the first. The land will produce abundantly for you now, Samuel Thorne. The drought ends today. Can you not smell the rain coming?" As if summoned by his words, a fresh breeze swept through the corn, carrying the unmistakable scent of approaching rain. In the distance, thunder rumbled softly. "But that's not the true gift." The old man continued, his gaze moving from Samuel to Maria to the children and back again. "The seeds you planted in the earth are powerful, yes. But the seed of kindness you planted when you gave away your last hope, that is the miracle that will continue to grow long after this corn has been harvested." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small pouch, the very one that had contained Samuel's family seeds. "Your sacrifice has been noted. Your heritage returns to you, multiplied." Samuel accepted the pouch with trembling hands, opening it to find not 27 seeds but hundreds, each one gleaming with vitality, each one promising new life. "Plant these as you always have," the old man instructed. "They will grow normally but abundantly. Your family's legacy continues, strengthened by your willingness to let it go when compassion called." Fat raindrops began to fall, pattering on the broad corn leaves around them. The old man tilted his face upward, letting the rain wash over his features. "Perfect timing," he murmured, then turned back to the family. "I must go now. Others are waiting, other tests must be offered, other choices observed. Will we see you again?" Emma asked, reaching for the old man's hand without hesitation. He smiled down at her, his eyes twinkling. "Perhaps. The world turns in unexpected ways." He looked at Samuel once more. "Remember what you've learned here. In giving, we receive. In letting go, we find. In sacrifice, we discover abundance." With those words, he stepped backward into the curtain of rain that had intensified around them. A sudden gust of wind bent the corn stalks, and when they straightened again, the old man was gone, vanished as mysteriously as he had appeared. The family stood in silence as the gentle rain soaked into the thirsty earth, bringing the promise of renewal to land long suffering under drought's cruel hand. "Samuel," Maria whispered, her fingers intertwining with his. "What happens now?" He squeezed her hand, watching as their children spun joyfully in the rain, faces turned upward, tongues out to catch the falling drops. "Now," he said softly, "we harvest what has grown. We share with those in need. We remember that miracles come not to those who cling tightly, but to those who open their hands to give when they have almost nothing left." The rain continued to fall, washing away months of dust and despair, nourishing seeds both visible and invisible. Seeds of corn, seeds of hope, seeds of a story that would be told for generations to come. The harvest began the next day. Neighbors came to help, astonished by both the quantity and quality of the corn. Each ear was perfect, each kernel bursting with flavor and nutrition, unlike any they had tasted before. Tests would later show that this corn contained higher levels of every beneficial nutrient, with none of the drawbacks of modern hybridized varieties. True to his nature, Samuel shared generously. Every family in the county received bushels of the miraculous corn. The local food bank's shelves overflowed. Samuel even set aside special portions for those who had fallen on particularly hard times. Anonymous gifts left on doorsteps in the night. When the corporate buyers returned with ever larger offers, Samuel refused them all. This harvest, he explained quietly but firmly, was not for profit. It was for people. What he did sell, at fair market prices to local buyers, brought more than enough to pay off the bank, repair all that had fallen into disrepair, and establish a comfortable safety net for his family. The rest he stored carefully, preserving seed stock for future plantings and food for the community through winter. As fall deepened into winter, the Thorn Farm became a gathering place. Neighbors who had once avoided the failing property now found reasons to visit, bringing dishes to share, stories to tell, hands ready to help with winter preparations. The farmhouse, so long empty and silent, now rang with laughter and conversation. Maria hung new curtains in windows that had been bare for too long. The children brought friends home from school to see where the magic corn had grown. In the evenings, the family sat together by the fireplace, making plans for spring planting. Normal plans this time, though with a new appreciation for the miracle of growth itself. On the coldest night of December, as snow blanketed the sleeping fields, Samuel stood alone on the porch, looking out at the land that had been restored to him, not just physically but spiritually. The oak tree stood silhouetted against the star-filled sky, its ancient branches reaching upward like hands in gratitude. "I don't know if you can hear me," Samuel said softly to the night, "but thank you, not just for the harvest but for the lesson." The wind whispered through the oak's branches, and Samuel could have sworn he heard words carried on that breeze. "Remember, sacrifice before harvest." He smiled, his breath clouding in the cold air. "I will," he promised. Every day, inside, Maria called his name, her voice warm with love restored. Samuel took one last look at the starlit fields, his heritage, his future, his miracle, and turned toward home, his heart as full as his barns. Some said later that the miracle was in the seeds themselves, some exotic variety with extraordinary properties. Others claimed it was the sudden end to the drought, or some scientific anomaly of soil and climate that created perfect growing conditions. Samuel knew better. The miracle wasn't in the corn, it was in the giving.